Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Growing Kentucky's Leaders. I'm one of your hosts, Sheldon McKinney.
And I'm your other host, Ruth Ann Fink.
And today we have with us Austin Hazelwood. He is a past Kentucky FFA state president. He's celebrating his 10th anniversary this year at state convention. But he is just one of my favorite alumni stories that we get to share because even when I met Austin as a freshman in college over 10 years ago, he shared that his aspirations were to work in the distilling industry here in Kentucky, and he's done just that. He is a sensory and innovation specialist with Maker's Mark, and he's used his influence to just help continue to support Kentucky FFA. So we got a lot of fun stories to share today. Austin, welcome to our show.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here and talk about this. This will be a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure. So tell us a little bit about who you are, where you come from, what your FFA experience was like, and how it's led you to this career path.
Yeah, we'll start from the beginning. I grew up. My family were dairy farmers from Mercer County, between Harrodsburg and Solvisa. My father was a full time tobacco and dairy. Did tobacco until the buyout of 2003, and then invested further into the dairy industry, and did that pretty much unbroken, except for 1 or 2 years until 2014, when I graduated high school from Mercer County High School and went to University of Kentucky. And obviously, for this, FFA started well before I was a state officer. Growing up around agriculture, and then my brother and sister, and all of my cousins, and everyone, and it's a small town as well. Everybody, friends and family, had been involved either in the ag industry and also in FFA, out of relationship to that. And as a freshman in high school, I tried out for the freshman officer team. We had freshman officers, and then the other chapter officer team was the other 3 grades in the school, and I was the historian, I believe, on the freshman team, and continued to be engaged with FFA, competing in competitions. We were huge into parley and impromptu speaking. I mean, all my friends would compete with each other doing it. It was a lot of fun. And my senior year of high school, I was the chapter president and the Bluegrass region president. So I knew at that point I was pretty invested into the organization, and I wanted to try to go for the state office, and did that. And that panned out. Became the state president for the 2014-2015 term.
Yeah.
And all the while, I kept going to University of Kentucky. I originally wanted to be an agricultural educator. And I still have a passion for education. We can kind of get into that later on. We talk about my position now. I mean, that's still a huge amount of it. That skill set has a direct transfer into my professional life now. But I decided halfway through college I didn't want to be in a formal classroom setting. And I always found the distilling industry interesting. I remember going and picking up distiller's grain, the stillage, but the byproduct of distillation from Four Roses and Wild Turkey. That's closer. Those are distilleries closer to where I'm from.
Sure.
And I always had questions about it and stuff. And at the time, the industry was so small that you had nowhere near the amount of people in the community that actually were actively working in the distilleries. I mean, it was a keystone historic industry of the state, but the economic impact and the scale of it is nothing compared to what it is now. So I went to school. I decided I wanted to be an extension agent about halfway through, and switched majors, but still in the College of Ag. But I kept trying to hold out for a internship in this industry, and I would look for things. And then one day, sitting on the couch of my girlfriend over at her house, my wife now, her roommate had sent me along an email for an application to an internship program at Maker's Mark Distillery. And obviously, Maker's Mark is the house bourbon of Kentucky. It's iconic in the state. Everybody's basement has the UK bottles or the University of Louisville bottles dipped, the different colors, red and blue and so forth. And I was like, that could be cool. I'll talk to anybody. I don't care to do tours and anything like that. That'd be fun. I can blab on. So I applied for that internship and got that the summer before my senior year in 2017 while I was at UK. They liked me enough to keep me around, so they would let me help out on the weekends and stuff while I was finishing up my senior year. I graduated, on Derby Day of 2018, I went to work full time that Monday, and that's
Wow.
been
This is
it.
in your career.
Yep. That's pretty much what I've said. It's 8 years if you count the year I was an intern. May 20th, I think, was when I first started as an intern.
Yeah.
That's great, Austin. Not many people when they're in college get the opportunity like that to say, this is a dream of mine to work in this kind of industry. For you, it was the distilling industry. And then it does play out and you're still there. Like
Yeah.
that is an accomplishment, and we're just so happy for you. And you can tell like you really love what you do. You've grown within the company too in different roles. And you mentioned the economic impact. And I want you to touch on that some more because it has changed a lot over the years. So just tell our listeners a bit about what makes the distilling industry so special to our state.
Yeah.
What is that economic impact if you have some of those like big, memorable numbers for our listeners to really grasp how big this is for Kentucky?
Yeah. Overall, if you just go by the big aggregated numbers, not speaking makers here, the entire industry
Sure.
amongst all, just we're keeping it Kentucky specific because believe it or not, Kentucky bourbon, while it is one word most of the time and all of it, most of it is produced here. It does not have to be produced in Kentucky. But just talking Kentucky alone, the 120 counties of this state, it's a $9 billion economic and tourism powerhouse impact.
Mhm.
Really, for the longest time, there were only 11 scaled operating distilleries and brands for majority of the 1970s, 80s, 90s, into the 2000s. I think right now, and I could misquote this, but around this, there's around 80 operating distilleries in the state of Kentucky. Forever, it was all Anderson County, Versailles, Woodford County, Jefferson County to some extent, and Nelson County, and then Marion County here, just those 4 or 5 counties.
Mhm.
Now I think there is a operating distillery in over 40 counties out of 120
Wow.
counties in the state.
Yeah.
And then large scale distilleries that employ a significant amount of people across the state. These are not just small producers, which are very important as well.
Sure.
But right now, if you include all the ancillary supporting industries and vendors, which we can get into as far as job opportunity, when people think about whiskey, they think about the distilleries where the grains come off the truck and you mill the grain, mash the grain, ferment, distill, put into a barrel, age, and then bottle it. That employs tons of people. That's a very dynamic process that requires a lot of hands and inputs and outputs. But with all the supporting vendors that we have to source raw material from and buy equipment from that make those pieces of equipment and grow the grains for us, it's around 23,000 people employed in association with this business in the state currently.
That's huge. And then I think we've done a visit before with a cooperage. So you all, they make barrels, and then you all help support the forestry industry and loggers and people
Yeah.
having the market to take hardwoods.
Mhm.
It's huge.
And that company, and something I tell people that I think is pretty impressive, as big of an industry as it is. So like going off the latest stats here, the entire Kentucky whiskey industry, or if you count the distilling industry, because we do make other spirits here besides just bourbon. We make rye whiskey. There's some malt whiskey produced now. There's even brandy, a brandy distillery in Louisville. But over $500 million in exports out of the United States. So significant impact, but as big as it is internationally now, and probably will continue to grow that way, hopefully, most of the supporting companies are still Kentucky based. So all of the legacy distilleries like Maker's Mark, Wild Turkey, Jim Beam, all of the ones the big classic ones you think about, all of the stills that we use to distill the product with is made on Franklin Avenue in downtown Louisville in the Nulu neighborhood, which is now a Trinity Hospitality neighborhood, by the Sherman family of Vendome Copper and Brass Works. Every legacy distillery in the state runs Vendome equipment. That's the largest distilling equipment manufacturer in the United States. A lot of the equipment to fill barrels and dump barrels with is made by a company out of Lebanon Junction in Bullitt County. And then, like you talked about barrels, we only use one barrel supplier, one cooper. That's a professional that builds barrels. That's what you call it, is a cooper. And a cooperage is the facility where the barrels are built. That is a very, very complex industry. It's a very long supply chain with lots of variables to it. But we use the largest barrel building company in the world. That is Independent Stave Company. That is also a completely family owned and operated company. largest barrel builder on earth. Brad Boswell, owner, CEO, whole thing. So it's pretty significant. All of our barrels are built, so they have 3 different cooperages in the U.S. And it's funny. There's 2 Lebanons in this story. Lebanon, Missouri, is where the Boswell family's from, and Lebanon, Kentucky, here in Marion County, that's the county seat of this county. That is their second cooperage site. They opened up, I believe, in the 80s. And then their newest site is out in Moorhead, Kentucky, which is called the Commonwealth Cooperage. And besides from that, they've invested 2 other facilities to just make the staves. That is the raw planks of wood. 30 to 35 of them comprise a bourbon barrel. You have one out in Marshall County, and also one in Rowan County as well, close to the new cooperage site. So
I've been to the stave mill and I've been to see the cooperage, and it is truly, you see the staves made come with the line, and then it is people who assemble the barrel. They figure out how these pieces of wood fit together to make the barrel.
It's pretty hands-on. It's pretty labor
Yeah.
intensive.
Yeah, it's very labor intensive.
It's a real trade.
Yeah, there's no nails involved, so it's incredible.
Yeah, it takes a lot of manpower to do that.
So that is so special because all the equipment comes from here, the barrels come from here, but also the corn. Let's talk about how you impact agriculture, and that's kind of your introduction to this industry, was buying distillers' grain from the distillery to feed your dairy cows. But now, what's been the impact that you all have had on farmers and the grains they're growing?
To put it in a structural perspective, probably not the most fun side of things to talk about, but very important. Bourbon is a very high quality product by its own merit. So it is a federally regulated product. We are actually oversighted by an arm of the federal government called the Tobacco Trade and Tax Bureau. Anyway, they have a codified framework that we have to follow, certain procedures we have to do to be called bourbon whiskey on a label, to be called Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. Any word you see on a bottle of distilled spirits in the United States means something in a legal framework. Anyway, bourbon has to be 51% corn by law. It's got to be majority made from corn. Almost all bourbon is made with more than that, and then typically 2 other grains, rye or wheat, and also malted barley. Right now, the current figures are that the distilleries collectively in Kentucky source 21 million bushels of corn just from this state. And a lot of your rye and malted barley is grown in northern climates. So really a domestic impact outside of just Kentucky, but 21 million bushels of corn, we're talking dozens and dozens of thousands of acres, if not flipping the other
data you sent us said that since 2009, corn production here in Kentucky has increased over 300% to accommodate the need for that industry.
And what's unique too is, as a lot of, I was talking about, I grew up in the dairy industry. The dairy industry is a little different in landscape now than it was, obviously, the tobacco. Kentucky was a very smaller scale producer, high cash yield per acre type agricultural state compared to your Midwestern states, where it's, and now it's a grain and beef cattle production is much more significant in the industry. You kind of have seen that time frame where those 2 agricultural industry, those parts of the ag industry have grown a lot, and that's been really fortuitous for bourbon producers because we can source a lot more of the grain locally. Selfishly speaking, for Maker's Mark, we use 70% corn, 16% wheat, 14% malted barley specifically to make our bourbon whiskey with. All of the corn we buy through R&B, which is a family-owned operated company. They basically act as the elevator. They own the bins, they own the trucks, they store the grain, clean the grain, truck the grain to us. They send us a couple semi, loads of corn alone a day. And then Peterson family of Peterson Farms, we only buy their wheat. They solely supply us the wheat. I mean, they send us 1 truck on average a day, so you're talking thousands of bushels of wheat alone per week. But yeah, I mean, it's significant. I mean,
amazing. Yeah, it is a true Kentucky product that impacts Kentucky agriculture and jobs throughout. So it's been pretty special to figure out ways we can work together.
Yeah.
Austin, I have to tell you, one of my favorite things just in life is to hear people who are really passionate about something, like tell you about that thing that they're passionate about and just catch that enthusiasm. I have an example of this. I went to a, a logging industry visit one time, and a man had like a piece of a log, a circle. What am I trying to say? You know,
Big
like
bolt, like a cut, like a piece of
yes,
log
it's
that's been
cut, and it
cut.
was over
You have
this
a
tree that
bolt.
was
Yeah.
over like 300 years old. And he was telling you like all of the things that happened to the tree through the rings.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I've never thought about, I was fascinated by it. You have given me this experience when a few years ago, I got to bring foundation directors from across the country to Kentucky for some professional development. And I asked if you would give them a tour of Maker's Mark. And you were so dynamic. You were just clearly so passionate about every aspect of this industry, your company, what you all do, the process of all of this, that your enthusiasm is contagious, but your FFA communication skill set was on display because, I mean, you had to be like the best tour guide ever. It was really incredible.
Yeah.
And I'm proud. I was so proud of you that day.
I
And,
appreciate
and
that.
I'm proud of all the things you've gotten to do, but I want you to, you've had a recent job promotion. Why don't you tell our listeners, what does your job look like at Maker's Mark? What is a sensory and innovation specialist? Or
So yeah, previously, and I'm still currently in the transition until my old job is backfilled. I was formerly the private selection specialist where I helped coordinate the single barrel selection program. So kind of a more of sales and marketing, um, but distillery based leaning job, I guess. But now I'm the new sensory and innovation scientist specialist for the distillery. So and we were talking about this earlier today with some coworkers. As we've talked about already over the past 15 minutes, this has a lot of levers that as whiskey distillers we can push and pull on directionally to have big outcomes of flavor, because ultimately it's very technical, it's very science heavy. So if you like those applications, engineering, mathematics, chemistry, biology, there's plenty of that for you in this business. But all of our efforts are judged as to how good the whiskey tastes, and does it taste consistently that good the right way every single time, bottle to bottle, millions of bottles a year. And so we have sensory panels at every distillery. And so part of my job is to help run and document and coordinate the training of all the sensory panelists. So there's several dozen people at the distillery to where every day the quality team will set up the liquid samples of our product at all different process points, right off the still, right before it's filled in the barrel, while it's aging several times, the final batch product, even the first few bottles that come down the line. And we will do what we call organoleptic testing, smelling essentially the product, because
Mhm.
you can quantify this as much as you want for sure, and that's incredibly important. But the qualitative side, this and this is the end all be all, and so I'll help run that. Train people. I've tasted a lot of whiskey in my previous job. That was a lot of what I did with customers, was figuring out what they wanted out of our product in the private select program, and so those skills translated as well. But then obviously the communication skills and the informal educational background and formal educational background I had from school has helped that a lot, because that does play in quite a bit. That's half the job, and then the innovation side is the office I'm coming to you from right now, looking at ways that the process can always make the whiskey better, um, looking at different maturation projects and studies and new product innovations, things like that. So that'll be a lot of fun as well. Whole lot of things going on, whole lot of new stuff thrown at me. So I'm excited. It's going to be difficult, but it's going to be fun at the same time. It's a challenge.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll rise to the occasion. You've filled so many different roles within this company, and I just always think it's really rewarding to see someone take what they're interested in and passionate in, and they grow, and they're lifelong learners. We try to tell our FFA members that all the time. So you're a
Oh,
great
yeah.
example of that for sure.
Yeah, for
And
sure. I mean, if you find something you're passionate about, you don't work. I mean, some days may feel like work, but
yeah,
overall, you'll see the intuitive value in it all.
yeah, and you're not just settling with like I know how to do this job. I'm really comfortable in it. Like you're willing to challenge yourself and move forward.
Makes every day
Austin, I
fun.
also want our listeners to know that you have really been latchkey in helping Maker's Mark and Suntory Global Spirits as a whole find ways to support Kentucky FFA's mission. Like you have been that connector piece in a lot of ways, and it's been a very impactful connection that you have fostered and has lived on. There's a lot of rules about how a distilled spirit can be a support and sponsored in nonprofits. There's just lots of nuances that come with that. In a really meaningful way that we have partnered has been at our annual Blue and Gold Gala. And so twice now, Maker's Mark and Suntory Global Spirits has donated a barrel of bourbon and that we auction off at our gala. And it's been such an origin story of like some really special experiences that our donors have got to have through this donation. And so, but it's more than just donating a barrel. So I want you to share what does that whole experience really entail? Because I know you played a key role in that with your last role.
Yeah, I know. In 2022, we had one barrel freed up to send to the gala to raise money for the foundation, and then ended up having to do two last time, which is good. The competitive nature of the event rose to the occasion for sure there.
Yeah, so to fill everyone in, this past year at the gala, what happened, which we had been in communication, we knew that there was going to be a barrel, we were going to donate that. It was heavily marketed. People were excited. The night of the gala, which there's a reserve, right? Like there's a reserve price that's set on it. Well, that reserve was well met. And
Hey, the barrel went for $26,000.
yeah, so we were 11,500 over the reserve price for being transparent. So one of your coworkers who was helping steward this relationship and this donation, she was in attendance. And I see her. I'm sitting in the back of the room, like at our staff table. I see her walk up to Sheldon at the MC table and like exchanging some words. And before I know it, she's like, "This is going so great. Let's sell another one." And so at the same price. And we did. And that was huge. I mean, that was monumental for what we try to do with raising funds to accomplish our mission. And that really I'm not trying to hype you up too much here, Austin, but that really has all started with you and fostering this relationship. But before we tell those stories, I do want you to share, it is more than a barrel that these folks won. So what does that whole experience really entail?
So the private selection process is where the group of individuals that are ultimately going to end up with 240 bottles, 40 cases of whiskey, a true full barrel's worth of product that come down here to the distillery. We show them all the operations, how we make the whiskey, the distillation process, the maturation process, aging. We even show them bottling and the uniqueness of Maker's Mark from a brand standpoint, and we hand dip every single bottle in the signature red wax. And then we have a custom built, what we call a finishing cellar, which is partially underground. It's climate controlled around 55 degrees to keep a cool, moderate environment around the barrels. And then we lead them through a pretty substantial tasting where they try different whiskeys that have different what we call finishing staves applied to them additionally for 9 more weeks after the classic barrel of Maker's Mark has already been aged for the standard 6-7ish years. And those finishing staves, of which we apply 10 of in each barrel, will push and pull the characteristics of the classic whiskey in all different directions. The flavor, the finish, the aroma, the overall tone of what the bourbon is. They can completely customize that liquid to whatever it is they want it to be, what they want to walk out with. Specifically, there's 1,001 possibilities through this program. So right now, with the partnership with the foundation, we've knocked out 3. So we got still more work to do. Great stuff accomplished, but there's 998 more out there.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, and so a big shout out. Peterson Farms bought the barrel in 2022 and they bought it in 2024. That's such a special gift because it's their wheat in there. So then
he's actually coming to pick it up. Burner and them are actually coming to pick it up tomorrow.
Well, you
Speaking
take
of,
good
Aw.
pictures of him. He does that. So good pictures. And then they get to put a label on it that says, this is Peterson Farms, what that looks like. Our
Yeah.
other buyers this year was Daryl
Wow.
Billings, Tanner Chrysler in Stanton, Kentucky, and then the Buchanan estate. Kevin and Gina down in Somerset. They went in as
They were great
partners
people. They
together.
were a lot of fun to
Mhm.
host.
Yeah,
I try to host each of those, any of those winners. I try to host myself, obviously, to
of course.
just the relationship with the foundation. I also want to speak really fondly of Elle Andrus was the lady that
That's
Yes.
right.
gave the green light to match the first barrel at this previous gala. So she's fantastic. She's been absolutely instrumental in growing our what we call higher purpose partnerships in
Yeah.
the company. I'm definitely going to have to forward her this
Yeah,
discussion and
please
stuff.
do.
And,
She's been fantastic to work with, but you all
So great.
have. And, we do think, how can we partner together in a positive way? You said for a higher purpose. And what you all have done has been for a higher purpose. So all those funds that now it's $70,000 plus we have gained from these 3 barrels that we've auctioned to Kentucky FFA. It has provided grants for our students. It's sponsored FFA jackets. It's sent students to WLC, the Washington Leadership Conference. It has grown our mission and vision. And you all you're a distilling company, but you're based in agriculture. Without
yeah,
agriculture, it
100%.
doesn't exist. So it's just this awesome partnership.
It is 100% applied ag. There is no ifs,
Mm.
ands, buts about it. It's forestry, and it's not just strict livestock or crop production. It's environmentalism, it's water quality management, it's forestry, it's the entire picture. It's not just production ag, which obviously we use tons of, but
Mhm.
opportunity wise, it's
Yeah.
multi-tiered.
And being here in Kentucky, growing up in Kentucky, you maybe not realize how much people recognize this industry for Kentucky.
Mhm.
When I got to bring that group of foundation directors here, since that time in 21 or 22 when they came, we have had 4 who have made a special trip, like brought their spouse back, came and planned a whole tourism weekend in Kentucky based around the Bourbon Trail. And
Oh yeah,
yeah,
I think we sometimes forget that. Or not forget, but when you're around it all the time, you get a little used to the context of where you're at, but how unique of an industry this is. From a historical and international perspective, you have Scotch whiskey, Irish whiskey, Canadian and Japanese whiskey, which have incredible histories and heritages and traditions, but Kentucky is the heart of America's native spirit, is what bourbon is known as. It is a geographically protected by trade partnerships, America's only native spirit. You cannot produce bourbon in any other country. It is,
yeah,
and 94% of it comes from Kentucky. Kentuckians created the style of production. We were a frontier state, so we grew a lot of corn historically, is why we make our whiskey out of corn still today, whereas most places use rye or malt traditionally.
Mhm.
So very special now. I give you some I tell people from out of state talking about that. Kentucky punches above its weight class a lot in this
Mhm.
industry. So um, we now currently, in a state of roughly 4.5 million people, have 14.3 million barrels of just bourbon laid down, maturing in our rick houses across the state. And that's, I believe
Yes.
that figure does not even include other spirits. But if you were strictly talking
Yeah.
bourbon, over 14 million barrels. It's a lot of jobs. It's a lot of wood. It's a lot of grains grown.
Right.
A whole lot to make it
Yeah.
happen. Even the rick houses primarily are built by just
Kentucky.
one or two companies. Yeah.
Yeah.
Based
Let
on
me say
Mercer.
Kentucky punches above their weight. I think we do that in a lot of things. I think we do that in
Mhm.
FFA. I think we do that in basketball, in all
Yes,
sorts of
yes.
things. It's great. It makes me proud to be a Kentuckian, one of many
Yeah,
things. So,
no doubt.
well, Austin, it has been a real joy getting to watch you grow and into this role. I think back to when you were a state FFA officer and just how far you have come. If you could go back and give yourself or students like you some advice for how to operate at that time and how to get the most out of their FFA experience, what would you say?
Yeah. You got to be willing to get your hands, dirty into the process and don't say no as far as make yourself available, work hard, learn a lot, be humble about it, and it'll pay off for sure. And when you make it, like this partnership with the foundation, everything, it's very important that you give back.
I love that. Yeah, don't forget about your roots. Don't forget about what helped you get there in the long run, you know. And you've done just that. We really appreciate this partnership and look forward to it in the future, honestly, like where it will go from here.
So do I.
Yeah. Austin, this has been such a great conversation, and we appreciate you and your FFA experience and just learning about your role and everything. Before we end this episode, we do always like to ask our guests the same 3 questions. We talk a lot about, you know, some themes on this podcast. Leadership's one of them. So what keeps you motivated as a leader?
I'd say, like I said, I still do a lot of informal education in my job. When you see the light bulb moment for someone, whether it be a concept, the bigger picture, the technicality behind the process of what we do in my job, seeing that moment when it clicks for someone, that's important to me. I get a lot of self-satisfaction out of that for sure.
No, that's great. We've talked about how you've been engaged with us philanthropically. You know, we are philanthropy. It's how you give back time, talent, and treasure for a greater good. Aside from all the things you've done for FFA, what have been the most meaningful ways you have gotten to participate in philanthropy?
Oh Lord. I mean, from my job professionally, I mean, we raise so much money for, I mean, really, we talk about the 3, let me put it this way. Makers has the 3 pillars of agriculture, the arts, and hospitality. That, as far as our higher purpose partnerships, that those are 3 cornerstones that we always try to focus on and stuff. So I've been a part of so many things like that. Obviously, I mean, personally, the connection with the foundation and helping raise money for the state organization has been, I mean, the most impactful for me personally. But there's been so many other things. We for veterans, for Kentucky artists across the state, we've raised so much money. During the pandemic, we created bottlings, a loan of which we took no profit from, and just donated to people who had fallen on hard times in the bar and restaurant industry, because obviously that's a significant customer base of ours. And so we tried to reciprocate that respect over the years back to them during that window of hardship. So that was really special as well.
That's awesome. Yeah,
I'm sure you get to see great examples all the time too with your all's work.
You had mentioned
Never brings people together. That's what we say.
Yeah.
Something good motivator.
May not know is that if you go visit Maker's Mark and do the distillery tour, you will have one of the most impressive art collections. Maybe, I mean, anywhere in the state that I have seen. Maybe share that.
Samuels family, yeah. So Maker's Mark was started by Bill and Marjorie Samuels from Bardstown, from Nelson County. And their grandson, Rob Samuels, is still the managing director today. And his father, Bill, is the chairman emeritus. He's technically retired, but he's down here a couple times a week as well. But the arts and aesthetics and the presentation, they take a great deal of pride in the place, and that's reflected for sure as far as the design. And 50 yards from where I'm sitting right now, there's a dry stone mason bridge where Neil Rippengale, who originally was a dairy farmer from outside Edinburgh, Scotland, is a true European dry stone mason who has built a bridge by hand, hammering away stone, and there's no concrete or mortar on it. So, I mean, really cool over the top stuff that's unique. You wouldn't see.
It's beautiful. Yeah. And shout out to Josh Mitchum, our camp director, who has done a lot of artwork in partnerships with Maker's Mark. So pretty neat.
I've worked in an event with Josh before.
Yeah. It's good.
It's a small world.
Yeah.
It's not a big
Well, Austin, our last question, you can take this whichever direction you want, is just, what is something you cannot stop talking about?
Something I cannot stop talking about.
Wow, we hear a little bit of everything. So like whatever has come to mind, that's what we want you to share.
I do talk about bourbon a lot. I mean, it is kind of my job.
You
I
can't be
think my
mad.
wife,
Yeah, outside of your
my
job.
yeah, I think my wife gets tired of it. I love this state as a whole.
Mhm.
Not to relate it back professionally, but bourbon is one of our core keystone products from the state.
Right.
And so I do try to always be an ambassador of Kentucky, like when I travel or anything like that, talk good of the place, promote the place, the uniqueness, the beauty of it, the opportunity that people can have here. I just feel like Kentucky has so much to offer outside of just obviously bourbon, but
Yeah.
as a state, it's culturally rich. It's a unique place geographically in the United States. It's a melting pot of people. So that's something. Anywhere I go, it's probably because I also have the thick accent. So when I my wife's from Chicago. When I go up there, people can "You're not from here, are you?" And
You're
it opens up the conversation pretty quick too. That no, I'm
Yeah.
from God's
That's
country.
right. Yeah. And then you tell them that you work for Maker's Mark, and they're like, "Do they print you in a
course you
lab
do.
like for Kentucky?"
I work at a bourbon distillery. Yeah, that's it. Like, no,
Yeah.
they're like, oh, well, that's
You're like, this checks out.
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
that's
good.
I do try to promote the state a lot to people I don't meet and stuff. And living in Bardstown, we've kind of made that home over the past several years, and it's a great place. It's become heavily dependent upon tourism in a positive way. It's now very hospitality focused. So for a town of less than 15,000 people, if you go out to eat or whatever, you'll see people from all over the United States, all over the world. I've been sitting at a restaurant before, and the guy beside me was from England, the other guy beside me was from Germany, and we all knew each other. We worked together. We were sitting there talking. So it's just a very unique niche microcosm of diverse array of people. So I always try to promote and tell people where the great places to go and things they should see, and try to build up the entire brand of the state, not just bourbon.
Well, you do that. And it was so great to get to put Kentucky's best foot forward with you when we get a host guest too. And so thank you so much, Austin, for all you do. It's made a huge difference for Kentucky FFA, and we're just proud of you. Thanks for being on our show today.
Thank y'all for having me. I've enjoyed it. It's fun.
Yeah. Okay. Well, guys, thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Growing Kentucky's Leaders. Growing Kentucky's Leaders is a podcast brought to you by the Kentucky FFA Foundation. Our music is performed by Bourbon County FFA member Joe Fritch. Artwork is by Julie Fritch Creative. Your hosts are Sheldon McKinney and Ruth Ann Fink, and you can find us on all social platforms at Kentucky FFA.